All right, welcome football fans to a Wednesday episode here of the Call Sheet Daily podcast on the Fans First Sports Network. I'm your host, Kevin Smith. It is Whiteboard Wednesday, where we sit with actual football coaches and we talk about the X and O's of the great game of football. And today, back on the program, my most frequent guest, a man who's been on so many times he probably hears that intro music in his head at night, Coach Paul Callahan. What's up, Cal?
Kev, always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Cal, I enjoy having you on because you're very knowledgeable. You're willing to do this. They always say, Cal, the best ability is availability. And
I am always available, Kev. That's the thing about it. And my family likes it when I'm on because now they have a podcast they can listen to.
I love it. I love it. So today's topic, Cal, is going to be the 2-minute drill, which is not obviously a literal concept. I mean, you're not literally only running this when there's 2 minutes on the clock. But what we're really talking about today is late game situations where you're down and you need to score points, whether it's a field goal or a touchdown. And how do you operate your offense in that situation? We're going to get into that concept with Coach Cal. Cal, let's start with this. When we talk about late game offense and you got to go down the field and score, I mean, this is a high pressure situation. You got one possession left to try to win the football game. And everybody's, the whole building, the whole stadium feels the moment. The crowd gets up, everybody's excited. What is essential as far as the mentality of your players in that situation where so much is on the line? What do you have to instill in your players to be successful?
I don't think it can be a one-time thing. I think it's got to be an all-the-time thing. So the way you practice, and for being together so long, you want to practice at a high tempo and put pressure on the players in practice. We used to say all the time, you work at practice and you play the game. Practice should be pressure. Chuck Noll had a great expression that I loved. He goes, pressure is what you feel when you haven't prepared. And so if you pressure them at practice, and it's not just at practice, it starts in the weight room, the things you're doing off season. I know you used to have competitions, a lot of competitions during the off season. You had a good one during the summer, and you split the group up in teams, and the team up into groups rather. And there was a reward for winning and a reward for losing. So the first time they felt the pressure of winning and losing wasn't on Friday night. It wasn't with 2 minutes left to go in the game and you got to drive the length of the field. You felt that pressure all the time at practice, the way you practiced, the off season, everything about your program was about applying pressure, putting kids in adverse positions, and having that next play type mentality that you need to be successful in 2 minutes.
There's a famous story. You've probably heard this before about Joe Montana in Super Bowl. I don't know which one it was, maybe 23, something around there. San Francisco against the Bengals. About 2 minutes to go. Cincinnati's ahead 16-13. San Francisco takes over on their own 8-yard line. They got to drive almost literally the entire field. And everybody's in the huddle, and Joe Montana comes running into the huddle, and he sees the actor John Candy standing on the sideline watching the game, and he says to everybody, "Hey guys, look, it's John Candy." And they all remarked like how cool he was, like in that moment for Joe Montana just to be relaxed enough to point something out like that. They asked Joe Montana afterwards, what were you thinking at that moment? And he said, "Oh, I just thought it was cool that John Candy was there on the sideline." But he said, "I didn't feel any pressure because we'd lived that situation so many times. Bill Walsh had prepared them mentally so many times for that." So let's talk about this then. What do you need out of different players in those situations? What are the essential coaching points? Let's start with your quarterback. What do you need your quarterback to be able to do in that situation?
All right. The first thing the quarterback's got to do, he's got to get the offense lined up as soon as possible. Make sure that everybody's set and ready to go. The second thing, the mentality's got to be, you're always going to stop the clock or you're going to put your team in a position to get a first down. Right? That's crucial, different in high school and college because the clock stops to reset the chains in high school and college as opposed to the NFL where it keeps running. So as a quarterback, you're going to be thinking, when I'm making my decisions, I can't do anything that's going to stop the clock, like take a sack, right? And I've always got to give us in position to either get out of bounds or get a first down. Like Chip Kelly used to tell the quarterbacks on the pole, you say, touchdown, first down, get out of bounds, right? And that's what you have to be as a quarterback in the 2-minute drill, right? Can I complete that pass? Will it be a first down to stop the clock? Can I complete that pass? Will it get out of bounds? If I take a sack, that's deadly for us. So don't stop the clock. Put us in position to get first downs. The perimeter guys are essential. The wide receivers have got to get you lined up. We run no huddle when I was at Rowan, and we ran it here, right? And we used to tell that to receivers, you're the engine of the offense. You've got to get us lined up as quickly as possible, get us in the right formation, and you can do things to help you out. And also know the situation. Hey, know where the sticks are. How many times we watched a game where a guy catches the ball in bounds and he cuts back inside, not realizing the situation instead of getting out of bounds. So get us lined up as quickly as possible. Know the situation. Know whether you can get a first down and the clock will stop while we get reset, or whether you can get out of bounds. And then finally, for the offensive linemen, their job is probably the easiest as far as getting lined up. They don't have far to go, but to get lined up, and they got to do it on the move. They got to make their calls on the move. They can't. It's not going to be a typical where you have your cadence and you have time. They've got to be able to get the line and already have the pass pro set what they're going to do. And a huge for the offensive line is do not commit penalties. Penalties are drive killers in the 2-minute drive. So whatever you got to do, don't commit a penalty. Does that mean that you let a guy beat you on pass pro? No, it means that you don't hold him when you get beat on pass pro, right? Penalties are deadly. Sacks are killers.
And there's little ways, I think, when you talk about being able to maximize the amount of time that you have, little things you can do to train your players to make sure that you're not wasting valuable seconds. Like whoever gets tackled with the ball, sprint it to the nearest official, the guy coming in to mark the football. Do you do anything, because the hashes are so wide in high school, do you do anything formationally to try to simplify or speed up the lining up process?
What we've done in the past is we haven't flipped the outside receivers, and that's crucial. The guy who lines up on the left plays on the left the whole time. The guy lines up on the right, he plays. We don't flop. The only guys we flip is the inside guys. A lot of times we'll say, all right, listen, if we're on the boundary, we're on the hash mark, we're always going to be trips to the field, right? If we're in the middle of the field or not near hash mark, we'll be 2x2. So you can do things formationally where they know right away where they're going to line up. And the quicker they can line up, the faster the ball snapped.
Yeah. What about your play sheet? How is your play sheet, your call sheet structured differently within the hurry up framework? I mean, are you operating from the entire menu, or have you trimmed it significantly?
No, it's significantly trimmed down. First of all, when the clock, you can't use any plays with motion unless the clock is stopped. So all the motion plays are out unless it's a first down play or the clock is stopped for some reason. You're going to run fewer formations. You're going to run fewer pass plays. You're going to have a set menu of plays that you're going to like that maybe wouldn't be field plays for you, but would definitely be a 2-minute type play, because of the way the defense. They're not going to give you the out during the regular part of the game, but they may give you a 2-minute drill because the corners are playing softer. They're playing quarters, and they're not worried about getting beat in the flats. So you may have those plays. You're going to have less verbiage in your plays. You're going to have shorter calls. If you were signaling stuff, it'd be shorter signals. They make you one-word plays. Anything that you can do to eliminate time, because, the biggest enemy is time.
Yeah.
Not your opponent, right? We got to defeat time first. So I might have some special plays that I'm only going to run during that time. I might only have some special red zone plays, but my menu is going to be very limited to the offense that we can run and run quickly, and we know in that situation.
Cal, how important is the sideline operation in the 2-minute drill? What's that have to look like? Because you obviously want your players to be able to execute as flawlessly as possible, but that execution really begins with the coaching staff. So how does the coaching staff operate so that the 2-minute drill is executed seamlessly?
I've been fortunate. I coached at Rowan where we ran no huddle, and then with you where we ran no huddle. So we had that organization from jump. In order to run no huddle, it's got to be organized chaos. You see 9 million guys signaling, some mean something, some mean nothing. And that goes on from day one. One of the first drills we used to do was the tempo drill. where we lined the guys up. We'd run these plays and we would time them how long it took to get 4 plays in the end zone. And we trained them, like you were saying before, to run the ball back to the official, to hand the ball to the official. Rich Rodriguez, who was one of the big no-huddle guys at West Virginia, I guess he's back there now, but in his playbook, he used to have real big and bold, spot the ball so we can line up. So it was a day one sort of operation. And so when you went 2 minutes, being in that no huddle, high tempo, high pressure situation in practice every day, the 2 minute wasn't that much more different for the offense. They were used to playing under pressure. The coaches were used to calling plays fast. For like when you call a play and you only have you're running no huddle or 2 minute, you've got seconds. So like we talked about before, your menu's smaller, but you've got to be able to get that play out of your mouth and signal or call to the players as fast as possible. That's why I think no huddle is so crucial to being a good 2 minute offense. A lot of years we didn't practice a ton of 2 minute, and we're good in the 2 minute because we practice no huddle every single play, every snap of practice.
I've heard people say things like, man, that offense looks really good when they're in the 2 minute drill. Why don't they run it all the time? But obviously there are limitations to it based upon what the defense is doing, based upon the amount of plays that you really can execute well at that high tempo. Can you simulate what's going to happen in a no huddle drill in practice? I know we talked at the beginning of the show about, you want to train them obviously properly for it, but how do you simulate it best to show that the kids what it's going to be like on a Friday or Saturday?
Everybody does this. They have the stopwatch, and they say, all right, now it's 1st and 10. We're on our own 25. We got 1:55 left in the game. We got 2 timeouts. We're down by 4. And you go and you run the plays on air through that, and you build success that way. They feel good about themselves. I don't know if that's the best way to do it. It's the most typical way to do it. You could do it in Skelly, and I like putting situations into Skelly and team and saying, and to make it more situationally, more situationally realistic. Yeah. That's one thing you say about the Eagles coach. Sirianni's a guy who always puts the guys into different situations. So I think that you might be better off. Like I said, everyone does that drill with the stopwatch and the clock's running. You got to kick a field goal. Everybody runs out. You feel good about yourself, and you feel terrible if you don't make it because you can't beat air. You're going to have a hard time with the other team the following day, and you do it on like a Thursday. But I don't know if it's not best to put it into different situations during practice situations, giving them those times. I remember you used to do when we were together at Ocean City, and I was calling the offense. You would say, all right, Cal, it's 3rd and 5. What do you got? Just all of a sudden you say, and so it's not on your script. And so you have to just call the play. So I think more situational stuff in practice is better than that, I don't know, the fake 2 minute drill that we all do against air. We better score against air.
Yeah, we were flawless in practice this past year on air and not so good when we had to come up against it in reality. So that is something you have to think a lot about. How do you want to practice it? All right, let's do this. Reflect throughout your career, whether it was at Ocean City or any of the other places you coached, where you had a successful 2 minute drill. You went down the field late in a game, scored points that gave you the lead. What went right? Why did it work?
Jumps to mind. I'm sorry.
Why did it work?
One of the things that jumped to mind was not a game that I coached in. It was a game I was watching. You had Sal on here, and Sal's a good friend. I've known him for years. And I went to one of his playoff games one year, and they were playing Hamilton. And now, Sal is a midline option, triple guy. They throw maybe, 20 times a year at best. So they're down, and they're in a situation, they're down 4, and they got to score against Hamilton. And there's less than 2 minutes to go in the game. It was one of the best 2 minute drills I ever saw. And every run play Sal called got more than 10 yards. Every time. So now the clock stopped. So if they ran option, the ball was pitched and they got more than 10 yards. It was amazing. And when they passed, it was either incomplete or he got more than 10 yards. Every play in that drive, and they went down the length of the field to score, was either an incompletion to stop the clock or 10-yard run play or pass play, because they only had so many pass plays. You know what I mean? Literally, Sal might have 5 or 6 pass plays because they were so good at running the ball. It was one of the best 2 minute drills I've ever seen in my life because of the pressure of the game and the fact that when he called a run play, they better have gotten 10 yards or they might have run out of the clock. As far as one I was involved in, you were there too. The one that comes to mind, we had a couple where we got real quick 2-minute offense where we ran a gadget play, where we ran hook and ladder or something like that, and you scored real fast. One time we beat Atlantic High our first year together. You remember we ran a double move, got down to like the 10-yard line and scored from there, where you got a big chunk play and got you down there. They're the best ones to get. We had a couple this year against Middle. You remember we hit a post and then we hit a double move down in the end zone. So if you get a big chunk, they're a lot easier to get scored under 2 minutes than that. But the one that sticks to mind was when we played those guys from across the bridge the one year in 2018 when Ian was our quarterback. And I think we had gotten sacked 6 or 7 times in the game. And they really pressured us, played a lot of cover 0, mixed it in with cover 2. And we had the ball back. I would say that we probably had about 3 minutes to go in the game. We had to go about 75 yards. It was very windy. It was really rainy. And we had trouble protecting the passer all game. Well, we went the length of the field. We're down 8, if you remember. We went the length of the field. We had 2 timeouts left, and we only used one of them when we got inside the high red, if I remember. And that was sort of for everyone to catch their breath because it was like 38 seconds left. I had to catch my breath because, like calling plays, you're like, all right, what do I want to run now? We're in a very specific situation. So we had gotten tackled inbounds, and so we called timeout, and then we scored 2 plays later. We scored with 32 seconds left. And then we had to make a 2-point conversion. Yeah. So the guy we had, our best receiver was Lash. You remember? And he was great. We just moved him around. There was a lot of window dressing to get Lash the ball. And so we scored an option route to him. And then we line him up as number 3 in trips. He's number 2 in empty. We score on an option route. And the next play we line up in nub trips. He's number 3. We hit him on a corner route to tie the game. So that was one, because just the circumstance. We're playing our big rivals. The wind's at our face. It's raining like that. We faced so much adversity. We had been sacked so many times during the game. We just fought through that adversity, went through the length of the field, and scored. And I was as proud of those guys as I'd ever been, of any team I'd ever coached.
Yeah. No, that was great until the last 30 seconds when they got the wind at their back and their kicker bombed the field goal on the final play of the game to beat us. But we don't want to.
Yeah, that wasn't as much fun. And if I'd have known that they were going to go the length of the field and kick that field goal, I wouldn't have asked for that timeout. But I didn't know it was only going to take us 2 plays to score. Because let me tell you, and Kev, you know this, scoring touchdowns is difficult.
It's hard, and I'm always amused, and I know that this is something that drives you nuts. When the defensive coaches will say, "Don't score too fast,"
yeah,
and the response is like, I can't worry about the clock. I got to worry about scoring. If we score in 1 play or we score in 10 plays, I don't know if I really want to control that. We got to score a touchdown here, and then you got to put it on the defense to stop them. I understand why they say that, but it's not
like I said. If I had it over again, if I known we were going to score in 2 plays, because I don't know, it might take us 6 plays. I think we were outside the 10. But, that's what goes on. That's the game.
Generally speaking, let's look at it from the opposite perspective. Generally speaking, when you've been in a 2-minute situation and it's failed, is there a common culprit for that?
Yeah, I think the organization. I was thinking about one 2-minute drill in particular. We played when I was coaching at Rowan. I coached receivers my first year there. We're playing Cortland State, who's a very good team. They won the national title 2 years ago. And we're in a position to beat them. We got plenty of time. And organizationally, we always told our wideouts they were on the ball, right? So that way, we used to play before wide. The slots would be off the ball. The outside guys were on the ball. And in that case, our tight end was better than our next slot. So we used the tight end on that drive, but it messed up the wideout. He had to line up off the ball. We end up hitting a 40-yard pass, but we're called for too many men on the line of scrimmage, right? And that was an organizational problem that we solved the next game. We said, all right, listen, if the tight end's in a 2-minute drill, they're always off the ball. The wide receivers are on the ball. So I think that, like, the organization and the structure, the way you practice 2 minutes and your rules for the guys in 2 minutes, they're the ones that sort of getting sacks are going to be deadly.
Yeah.
If you have plays that are loss of yards, you might as well forget it. It's tough enough to score when you lose yards. I forget what the percentage is, but it's very low if you have a drive or you have a loss of yard play that you're going to score. If you lose yards in a 2-minute drill, you're done, right? So I think the structure of how you structure your 2-minute drill, the rules that are simple for the guys to follow so they can line up and play fast. Because now with the tight end, And our wide receiver, who actually signaled to the line judge that he was off, but the line judge missed it. All those structural things when you don't want to do something new in that time. You don't want to lose yards, and you don't want new things in those times. To me, they're killers.
I think for me, when I think back on drives that have failed in these situations, the common denominator has been sacks. You just can't recover from them. The receivers are running down the field. They got to sprint all the way back. You put yourself behind the chains. It's just a killer. You have to implore to your quarterback, throw the ball away. That's the killer. All right, let's get you out of here on this. Last question. I'll give you a situation, and you tell me your mindset, right? You're 3 seconds on the clock. Let's say you got the ball around the 5-yard line. You're down 4. You got one last play. You're inside the 10. What's your thought process? What are you thinking other than score points? But what is your specific thought process here?
Let me start off by saying what my thought process is not during this time. There are no picket fences. Like from Hoosiers, the first time they run the picket fence and, Jimmy Chitwood makes the winning shot and they draw this play up. That doesn't happen. Drawing plays up in the dirt in the red zone don't happen. You know what plays score in the red zone? The plays that you work in practice. So I'm going to call something that the kids, we've practiced in that situation. They know in and out. They know what we're doing. Like the famous Montana play where he throws the ball to Dwight Clark on the catch. You remember against the Cowboys in '81, the championship game. They had practiced that a million times. They practiced that situation of what happens if it turns into a scramble. What does Dwight Clark do? Now he breaks back across the back end of the end zone. And you even see on the NFL Films one of Bill Walsh telling him, like, hey, if it breaks down, don't forget you got Clark in the back of the end zone. And my brother was a basketball coach and a really good one. He used to tell me that at a timeout in basketball, the kids only remember the last thing you say. So whatever you say last better be the most important. And so in those situations, it's got to be something they know. They got to do something that they know and they have confidence. I think about when we beat St. Joe's in 2020, if you remember, and we ran a play called Frankie, which was like a little rub place, let's say. But we practice it at the end of every Skelly or team. At least once a practice, we'd put the ball on the 3-yard line to simulate the 2-point play and run Frankie. Well, in this case, we were like 3rd and goal from the 4 or 5. And I remember Frank Lassasso, the place named after him, his son, he says, what about Frankie? And so, we had practiced that so many times, and the kids were confident. We scored. We beat St. Joe's. But that was the situation. You want to run stuff that they're familiar with. You want to run stuff they know. The stuff that you make up in the dirt, I don't know. It's been my experience that it just doesn't work. I'm reminded of a couple NCAA games. I remember Bobby Knight when they beat Keith Smart makes the winning jumper against Syracuse. I think it was 87, right? They don't call a timeout, and they asked Bobby Knight afterwards, and he says, "We run that play 1,000 times. What am I going to say to him?" And the same thing happened with Jay Wright when Villanova won their first national title. They ran a play that he didn't call timeout. They just ran a play that they run all the time. So it's not like some kind of gimmick or trick play. It might be something that you use specially in that situation, like Frankie was for us, but it's nothing pulled out of thin air. There are no magic, picket fences as far as my experience goes.
The Hollywood script writers would not like that answer, Cal. But
no, they would not.
But real football coaches should appreciate it for sure.
But Cal, we practice that every day. We have red zone goal line plays that we practice every day. So I don't want the kids to be surprised when we run it in the game. They know the situation we're going to run it in. And I remember once we beat Wesley at Rowan, and we had our backup quarterback in, and we ran down in the goal line. It was a 2-point play, but it was we ran it like on 3rd and 4, and it was called All-Star. And they said, "What about All-Star?" And I knew the backup quarterback had never practiced it. But he'd been playing football his whole life, But the rest of the offense knew it, and he knew how to sprint pass. He knew who he was throwing it to, and we scored on it. And it was just we ran a regular play that we knew and we were confident in with a guy who hadn't run it before, but he was a football player and he could make that pass. And he did.
Confidence is, I think, the key word there, man. You want your kids in that ultimate situation to feel extremely confident in what they're executing. Cal, this was great, man. Excellent conversation. And as always, I really appreciate you coming on.
Anytime, Kev. Thanks again for having me.
Absolutely. All right, that's our Whiteboard Wednesday episode of the Call Sheet Daily. Join me tomorrow, Thursday, State of the Franchise, and we'll be focusing on the Washington Commanders. I don't know, Cal. think the guy I got on, he's coming on. I think he thinks that they got a shot to close the gap between the Commanders and the Eagles next year.
He might not have watched that NFC Championship game last year. Maybe he didn't watch. I don't know. But I mean, the Commanders, they got a solid coach, and that quarterback, he's something else.
Yeah,
he's only going to get better.
Yeah, for a franchise that won 2 playoff games in 3 decades in the 90s, 2000s, and the teens, it's a good time to be a Commanders fan. So for Coach Paul Callahan, this is Kevin Smith. This has been the Call Sheet Daily. Have a great day, everybody.